Greetings, Internet faithful. I'm some guy named Rob from On Your Marks Wrestling, and this is the Friday edition. That is to say, this is the Friday show. I'm going to be trying to do these updates Monday, Wednesday, Friday because of my sort of busy-ish schedule over the next few weeks, as we're in the crunch time where I work, as I mentioned in my last video, and also with the summer months coming out and the sun shining and the family wanting to get out a little bit more. There's going to be a little bit less time to do everything, so I'm going to kind of condense things into three chunks. The Friday show, which is kind of going to take care of anything that happened Wednesday and afterwards, so, you know, your NXT, Impact, Smash Wrestling, along with anything else I might happen to catch. There's going to be a Monday edition, and that will handle anything that has to do with what happens over a weekend, pay-per-views especially. If there are no pay-per-views, I'll throw together a Q&A video or two, just something to make sure that there's some regular content going up that is wrestling related. And of course, the Wednesday show, which will tackle Monday Night Raw, Smackdown Live, and 205 Live. So, seeing as how this is the first one, and I'm kind of behind on everything, I figure I'll just kind of do a weekly recap, and so that way we can start the Monday show with a clean slate. So let's talk about Monday Night Raw and Smackdown Live on Tuesday. Wow, cookie cutter, lazy writing all around. Both shows felt like they were taken from ideas that were thrown out in previous weeks' creative meetings, because they had absolutely no idea what they were going to do coming out of Money in the Bank. So what they did was they took a whole bunch of ideas that they previously thought were not good enough to air and just sort of slapped them all together and hoped that no one would notice. And there is pretty much nothing that exemplifies this more than the openings to each show. You open up Raw with Alexa Bliss coming out and cutting her typical Alexa Bliss promo. Oh, she's so sincere, she's so sincere, she's so sincere. Whoops, oh no, I fooled you, I'm a bitch. And then you get to SmackDown Live, and Carmella comes out and does the sincere, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, I'm sincere, I'm sincere. Oh no, I'm still a bitch. It was almost like a cookie cutter promo. It's almost like they were reading the same script. It's like they couldn't figure out what they wanted to do. So they just said, you know what, just do a search and replace in Microsoft Word, replace Alexa Bliss with Carmella, change a couple paragraphs to kind of cover for the fact that we're not going to put Carmella through a table, and there you go. There's your opening to each show. Now, granted, at least Monday Night Raw had the benefit of having Ronda Rousey come out and look reasonably good in her segment on Monday Night Raw. She looked like a badass killer, which is what everybody expected, because quite frankly, we're seeing way too much of the smiley Ronda Rousey. The booking of Rousey has not been very good, and I don't think that they've handled this well. I really think that, to be quite honest, the women's division has been something of a shit show since the Royal Rumble. Since the Royal Rumble and the announcement of Ronda Rousey, well, it wasn't really an announcement, it was sort of like a surprise to kind of get the crowd involved and kind of get people talking about the WWE and the women's division in particular. It looks like they've just sort of automatically assumed that Ronda Rousey will cure everything, keep people viewing, and then they don't have to put any real hard work into things. And whereas the women's division used to be the strongest part of both Monday Night Raw and SmackDown because their matches were of pretty good quality for the most part, the storylines were solid, the motivations were clear, if not always logical. At least there was some clarity to it. And they weren't, for the most part, except for like the debut of Absolution and the Riot Squad, where they kind of did exactly the same gimmick on both shows for a couple weeks. Other than that, the women's division was really, really strong, and it was really holding up each show, in my opinion, and now it is just a complete disaster all around. And I know what a lot of you are thinking right now. You're probably listening to this going, well, okay, Rob, if you're such a smart guy, how would you book it? You know what? That's going to be Monday's video. There are no pay-per-views this weekend that I'm aware of, so I'm going to make that my goal for Monday to make a video how I would have booked everything coming out of Royal Rumble, which I'd promised for ages now, but more specifically, how would I have booked Ronda Rousey since her signing? How would I have booked things for Money in the Bank? And what would I have going forward into SummerSlam? I'm going to put together a comprehensive timeline for everything. That's going to make, in my opinion, a lot more sense than what's going on now, because quite frankly, what's going on right now is kind of insulting. Because on the one show, what you have is, you have the neon sign above Natalya's head that says, I'm going to turn on Ronda Rousey on one side, followed by the fact that they are finally, once again, restarting for the umpteenth time the Bayley-Sasha Banks feud, which now no one cares about because they have completely screwed this one up and missed the boat by several. I can't even fathom by how far it is that they missed the boat by. Like, the light from where they missed the boat from would take about 12,000 years to travel the distance for how far they've missed the boat on this one. And then you have the other show. You have Smackdown Live, where you have taken the longest reigning NXT Women's Champion, who had the longest undefeated streak probably in company history, definitely on the women's side. In terms of number of matches, probably one of the longest undefeated streaks of all time in professional wrestling, period. And now you've turned her into a complete chump. Asuka looks like an idiot on every show now. She is being outsmarted by someone who has been magically transformed from this complete ditzy blonde Jersey Shore wannabe who could barely string together 2 or 3 sentences without going into the excited, shrieky screeching, to suddenly becoming this grand criminal mastermind who can outsmart absolutely anyone that she is facing or in the ring with. It makes absolutely no goddamn sense. But let's get back to each show for a second and just sort of explain where I get the idea that everything that's on this show was a rejected idea that was previously brought up, and they just decided to go with it because they couldn't be bothered to write a show for after Money in the Bank. So I did explain earlier, you had the whole thing with Ronda Rousey and Alexa Bliss and the table spot. That was sort of your highlight of the show. Then you have a match, Seth Rollins versus Dolph Ziggler, which is a good match, a very good match for the IC title that Dolph Ziggler pulls off an upset win with, or for, or in, or whatever. But it seemed very random, because just the previous week, Dolph Ziggler and Drew McIntyre were talking about how they were going to take apart the tag team division. Well, you don't take apart the tag team division by winning the Intercontinental title, which is a singles belt. So, yeah, random doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Doesn't really do anything. Then you have Bobby Roode versus Kurt Hawkins. This match did not belong on TV. This is a house show match. This is a house show match that just happened to make it to Monday Night Raw, the flagship show. Then you have the whole Braun Strowman and Kevin Owens thing, which would have worked okay as a backstage promo, maybe, but just didn't seem to work here. I mean, the fans liked it, but it really didn't do anything. Did it really advance any storyline at all? You got the Deleters of Worlds taking on Heath Slater and Rhino. This is a match that's happened 100 times before. It's been, I think, at least twice on Raw already, and really didn't do much of anything. This, again, feels like a house show match. You have Chad Gable versus Jinder Mahal Part 3. This is the 3rd time they faced on Raw since the Superstar shakeup. Seriously, this is the 3rd time they faced on Monday Night Raw. Jinder Mahal has kind of changed his gimmick a little bit, but he's still cutting promos on Roman Reigns for some reason or other that I can't figure out. It makes no real sense. Gable jobs to Mahal because I guess Jinder Mahal needs a win desperately to stay even somewhat relevant. But yeah, I don't get it. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. We then move on to the next chapter in what is like the 5th or 6th volume of the Sasha Banks and Bayley saga, where nothing is really done. Yeah, they have a shoving match after the ring, or after the match in the ring, and then it turns into a shoving match and a brawl backstage, and it turns into another argument in the parking lot. Really, how late are you to the party with this? This is embarrassingly late. This is something that should have happened after Elimination Chamber in February. We are in June, mid-June, and you are finally getting to something that should have happened back in February. Why? You should have just moved on because no one cared about this. No one really gave a damn about this. This has now become a joke. Next up, you get Kurt Angle coming out to the ring to basically announce the exact same match that happened last year at Extreme Rules, where there was a multi-man match to determine who would be a #1 contender for the title. And of course, because WWE creative is an ironic term, out comes Roman Reigns again, much to the delight of absolutely no one, who of course feels that he deserves to be in the Universal title picture because he is the top babyface of the company in spite of cutting every single promo like a complete douchebag, coming off as a complete douchebag, acting like a complete so, he acts and speaks like a complete self-entitled douchebag everywhere. Social media, in his promos, and nobody gives a fuck about him. Nobody wants to see him champion except for Vince McMahon, and I don't think Vince gets it. You know, when his matches come on and people are chanting, "We want beach ball," is that really what you want your company associated with? Is that really what you want your champion associated with? We then, of course, get Bobby Lashley coming out to the ring to remind us of why we don't give him a live microphone very often. There is a very painful exchange between Bobby Lashley and Roman Reigns in the ring before the Revival come out and cut probably the best promo I've heard them do. This is the only time that their promos have actually impressed me, and it's not just because they're cutting promos against two of probably the worst guys on the mic in the company, although that doesn't hurt. But they came out, they had a legitimate, honest-to-God, good old-fashioned, old-school promo that, of course, following the GM in the ring formula, had to turn into a match right here, right now. But, I mean, at least they didn't do it to open the show, so I guess I can give them a teensy bit of credit for that. But yeah, I mean, this was one of the best things that I've seen the Revival do in a while. I would love to see them get a real push. I don't know why they won't pull the trigger on these guys. These guys are really good. They're talented. Their in-ring work is actually getting better. I didn't like them as much earlier on in the year. I thought they were rusty. It might have been ring rust because they were coming back from injury, but I felt that their tag team flow, that their match psychology was not really all that good. One thing I did like was when they were cutting the promo, they were telling Roman Reigns and Bobby Lashley how they were going to beat them. I thought that was actually pretty funny. But overall, this seemed to be kind of a forced match. It didn't really have any natural feel to it, although it is kind of nice to see the Revival sort of doing the coming out to make the big challenges so they can kind of get their names known. I'm guessing they're in for a push in the near future. I would hope so, even though they had to take the pinfall in this match. Next up, somebody needs to explain to me why they let Mojo Rawley off of main event. Why did they put him on Raw? Why did they put him over No Way Jose? And why did they bring No Way Jose up to the main roster if they're just going to have him job all the time? This really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Why bring him up to the flagship show if you're just going to job him out all the time? Are they going to put him in a tag team with Curt Hawkins? Maybe they should put him in a feud with Curt Hawkins, even though they faced, I think, like a week ago on Monday Night Raw, just to have them, who is the true king of the jobber on Monday Night Raw? We then get the one other high spot of the night on Monday Night Raw, which is the Elias performance following his loss of the Intercontinental Championship match at Money in the Bank. I thought this was great. I'm looking forward to seeing what they're going to do with this and where they're going to take Elias from here. But again, this is the second or third little bright spot on a 3-hour show. Everything else felt like filler, including the main event, which was Finn Balor and Braun Strowman versus Constable Baron Corbin and Kevin Owens. It just, yeah, the less said about that match, the better. We then move on to SmackDown. SmackDown, of course, we open up, again, with the really shitty Carmella promo. And James Ellsworth coming out and cutting a promo was the best part of that entire spot. Before Asuka comes out, Asuka gets one kick on James Ellsworth, and then is made to look like a complete chump, which she has been since WrestleMania. Actually, probably since well before then. Since the Elimination Chamber, she's kind of been taken down a notch each and every week. Her career is pretty much in need, and she's in dire need of a reboot. She needs a character tweak. She needs something to happen to make her character relevant again, because right now I don't see a way for her to be a credible threat to anybody at this point. And again, continuing the trend of things that just don't belong on a main roster show on live TV, Becky Lynch versus Billie Kay. This match was fucking horrible. Billie Kay can't wrestle. Peyton Royce cannot wrestle. They're not heel worthy on the microphone as much as they're a couple of annoying bitches on a microphone. I get that most of that is the writing. Most of that is the writing, and it's the fault of the writers, and the performers are doing the best they can with the material that they're given. I get it. It's a highly scripted environment, but holy shit, they can't wrestle, and that's not the writers' fault. Billie Kay can't do fuck all in the ring, and they need to take her off TV unless she's just going to be in a managerial role. She's absolutely horrible. We then get the Usos coming out to cut a promo before Sanity hit the ring and absolutely beat the ever-loving piss out of them. Match never even gets started. Interesting kind of choice on how they do it. Not sure where they're going to go with it. I'm going to guess that they're going to drag this out and turn it into a real match by SummerSlam. Who knows? Next up, we get the Bludgeon Brothers versus the Good Brothers, Part 2. Twice the match, half of the build. 1, I don't know why this match had to happen so soon after Money in the Bank. 2, I don't know why we couldn't get a match of this quality at Money in the Bank on the pre-show instead of having to wait till SmackDown. I get that both shows are free TV, but you're using the pre-show of your pay-per-view to kind of sell what is the quality of the... What are you expecting as match quality for the night? And when you're putting on basically a really lame match to start off, to kick off your pay-per-view, and you're putting out something that basically is a stinker, what are you setting as the expectation of the quality of the rest of the show? Now, in fairness, the Bludgeon Brothers versus the Good Brothers on the kickoff show did set a pretty reasonable expectation of what you would get for the rest of the show, which is a mediocre pay-per-view. But really, that's not putting your best foot forward. That's not really going to encourage your average casual fan who's not already a subscriber of the network to plunk down their hard-earned dollars and either join the network or pick up the pay-per-view. Finally, we get the gauntlet match, the much ballyhooed gauntlet match to determine the number one contender for the WWE Championship at Extreme Rules. Daniel Bryan gets the biggest pop when Paige announces who the participants are, so you know he's not going to win. He's also the first one out, so you know he's not going to win. Big E is the second one out. You know he's not going to win, so you know Daniel Bryan at least makes it to the second or third round of this gauntlet. I thought that the first fall went way too long with Daniel Bryan versus Big E. Big E looked good, although he did a lot to put Bryan over. Then I thought that the finish of that, and then you have Samoa Joe coming out, who is the biggest most legitimate badass that they have in the company. He's rushing out to the ring. They cut to commercial. What the fuck? Who the hell decided that was a good idea? Seriously, who the hell decided that was a good idea, that as Samoa Joe is coming down to take advantage of Daniel Bryan, who's weakened by the first match, to have a commercial cut? And then you come back and the match is like 3-4 minutes already in progress. That fall ends in a BS countout finish, which was just absolutely horribly lazy, because it neither protects Daniel Bryan or Samoa Joe. It just looks lame. A DQ finish would have been even better. A countout in this case looked really, really stupid. Then having the Bludgeon Brothers come into the ring and take Daniel Bryan out because they crossed paths as Bryan was coming out for the match to begin with. And then The Miz coming out and eliminating Daniel Bryan in like 4 seconds. Like, what? Seriously, were you that pressed for time? Why didn't you shorten the first fall? You make the first, it just boggles the mind. It just, like, the writing decisions were so incredibly stupid. It makes my brain hurt. Anyway, Miz is now the man standing in the ring. There's one guy left. It's Rusev. And of course, in the pit of your stomach, you're thinking, oh shit, here we go. Rusev is going to put the Miz over because nobody's going to give love to Rusev in terms of the management. It doesn't matter how popular the Rusev, the Rusev Day calendars, the Rusev Day merchandise, and how loud the Rusev Day chants are. He's never going to win. They actually let him win the match clean with the accolade. They had the Miz tap out to the accolade to become the number one contender for the WWE title. This, to me, was the highlight of the show. This was the bright spot. It came right at the end, but it was the one bright spot on the show. Everything else, again, felt like filler. It felt lazy. It just felt like recycled material or material that wasn't good enough to make it on TV in previous weeks, and they just slapped it together and threw it up on the TV, hoping nobody would notice. Well, I did, and it sucked. Okay, maybe saying that it sucked is a little harsh, but it was bland. It was just not very interesting. It wasn't very compelling. Like, I can get how the next night on NXT, things were bland, but that's more forgivable. You're coming off of a pay-per-view, for one. You're coming off TakeOver Chicago, and you're also a completely pre-taped show, so you can't go ahead and tape matches that are going to air after the pay-per-view that give away anything in terms of results for the pay-per-view. You can't basically come out and have a tag team title match that's going to air on the Wednesday following the pay-per-view, because then you've given away who wins the opening match later on that night. Or on the Saturday. And yeah, WCW used to do that all the time. They've actually, if you look in the WCW record books, they actually have negative title reign days, where they basically taped a tag team losing the belts before like certain matches aired, so because they taped them out of order, so the actual title reigns of these teams were like -6 days. It's happened before. I'll have to look up some specific examples. I don't have any right now, but yeah, you can't do that anymore. There's too much social media. News gets out too fast. Now, the one thing that I will say with regards to NXT for this week, wasn't really impressed with anybody that they were trying to promote. The Mighty, that tag team, the Mighty used to be called TM61. They're still not very good. Other than like some offensive flurry that they got against the War Raiders, they look very bland and forgettable. They look like a low-rent version of the Revival, and that's not a good place to be. Bianca Belair and Dakota Kai, not really seeing anything special in either of them, certainly not in this match. Dakota Kai looks like she doesn't quite know what her gimmick is supposed to be yet. She seems very, very tentative in the ring. Her ring intro, she comes out looking not quite sure what she's supposed to be doing. She does this sort of weird pose and sign, but doesn't really know she's doing it right. At least that's what it looks like to me. As far as Bianca Belair goes, other than the really stupidly long braided hair and, okay, admittedly a really, really nice finishing maneuver. I really actually do like the finishing maneuver, but other than that, not a whole lot special going on there. So I don't get what the fuss is about with her either. And yeah, I mean, everything else was pretty much a lot of repetition, a lot of recapping what happened at the pay-per-view, which again is understandable because it is a taped show and you're coming off of a live event that was on the network. I expect things to be much, much better and back to their usual standard as of next week. Now, thankfully, a show that has remained consistent, and thank God they are the saviors of this week, 205 Live. I want to save sort of the best of the WWE for last. 205 Live has been bringing they've been delivering the goods week in and week out for as long as I've been watching, which is basically since a little bit before WrestleMania. Now, granted, that is not an entirely representative sample size, but you know what? They are consistently very, very good. The weakest show that I've seen from them has been decidedly above average. So they have been anything from decidedly above average to putting on matches that are better than what's going on the main event paper or the main roster pay-per-views. So take that for what it's worth. And I have a question to ask about 205 Live. Is there anyone right now in the WWE that is more deserving of the title of MVP than Buddy Murphy? For the last 3 weeks, he has put on some absolutely fantastic matches. His character is on point. His ring work is really, really good. He's putting on really great matches with no matter who he steps into the ring with, even though he's not winning all of them. In fact, he hasn't won a single one of them in the past 3 weeks. But yeah, he is just absolutely on fire. I can see him perhaps winning the Cruiserweight title between now and SummerSlam. And to be quite honest, I'm going to be very disappointed if there are no Cruiserweight matches on the SummerSlam card. Buddy Murphy deserves to be on the SummerSlam card fighting for the Cruiserweight Championship. I'm going to say it right now. That needs to happen. I'm also going to say, I completely told you so, that the Buddy Murphy Cedric Alexander match that went on about 3 weeks ago was better than absolutely anything that you saw on the Money in the Bank pay-per-view. If you recall a few weeks ago when I did my 205 Live review, I basically said that match, you could take that match, hold it in your mind, and then when the Money in the Bank pay-per-view came around, it would be in the top 3. It would, if it were put on the Money in the Bank card, it would fit in the top 3 matches of the night. It actually would have been the best match of the night. That's how damn good it was. And a lot of that, I mean, credit to Cedric Alexander. He is a phenomenal athlete, but a lot of the credit goes to Buddy Murphy. And that's why, as far as I'm concerned, he is like the MVP of not only 205 Live, but right now, much of the WWE at this point. Thankfully, the back half of the week provided some really entertaining wrestling. Last night on Impact, there was a good build towards Slammiversary with some really strong storylines. As much as I felt that it was a bit of a mistake to do the reveal of the backstage attacker, Killer Kross, before Slammiversary, the promo that they ran for Killer Kross was really, really great. I would have kind of preferred it, or preferred that they maybe held off like a week or so. Because the last that you saw, they were kind of cuffing Petey Williams, taking him away, making it seem like he was the backstage attacker. If they had gone like 2 or 3 weeks, because you still got a month before the pay-per-view, if you had gone a couple weeks with no attacks and made it look like it was Petey Williams all this time, and you could do all the speculation and all the this, the that, and the other, talking about, how he was charged and how he's under investigation by the police and everything else. And then all of a sudden, while Petey Williams is kind of under this investigation, maybe like a week or so before the pay-per-view, you have another attack. It's Petey Williams. He's laid out with the red X. Oh my God, what is going on? You have Petey Williams come back at the pay-per-view at Slammiversary and issue an open challenge, and that's when you do the reveal of Killer Kross, and you have him debut on the same card, and then you have your first match right there. And then the promo that you just finished airing this week, you could have aired it the week after Slammiversary or the first Impact after Slammiversary, because you already have it in the can, and boom, you've got a monster star right there, and he's had his pay-per-view debut. I think it would have been enough to generate a bit of interest for people who were following the storyline. But you know what? The way that they've executed it so far, even though it's not ideally what I would have done, they still did a pretty good job with it. I'm also a big fan of the return of Conan, following the victory by LAX to win back the tag team titles from Z&E, or Z&E for all of my Canadian followers and fans. I like the fact that that Conan was sort of calling out King for maybe being responsible for the attack or knowing what was going on, being at least complicit with everything, if not doing it himself. I think that's going to be a nice little storyline going into Slammiversary. Although I can see why you wouldn't want to have that storyline and the Killer Cross storyline going on at the same time, so people don't think, well, Conan was just taken out by Killer Cross, so why is he on King's back? Blah blah blah. Yeah, I can see why you have to end one or the other. I wish there was a way to kind of keep them separate and keep them distinct, and still keep them going till Slammiversary. But that's just me. I like my pay-per-views to be the culmination of one thing and the springboard for the next thing. That's kind of how I like pay-per-views. Here they're doing it before the pay-per-view, but you know what? So far, Impact has been doing pretty well with their storylines long term. They've been doing a lot of very careful planning. The writers, since the beginning of the year, have been doing a phenomenal job, so I'm not going to second guess them on this. That's just my opinion. One thing I will give the writers full credit for is what they're doing with Eddie Edwards. Eddie Edwards and Sami Callihan are probably two of the biggest beneficiaries of a botch that I can ever think of in professional wrestling history. That bat shot that Eddie Edwards took to the face from Sami Callihan was a complete fuck-up. It wasn't meant to go that way, but it somehow created two very, very compelling people. Eddie Edwards has been revitalized. He's now like this totally unhinged psychopath who is now hell-bent for wanting to legitimately murder somebody and is blaming his friend Tommy Dreamer for not allowing him to commit a homicide, and how preventing Eddie Edwards from committing a homicide has ruined Eddie Edwards' life and his marriage. And it's just watching him become more and more unhinged as weeks go on is actually kind of entertaining. And the skit that they did, I call it a skit because the way they filmed it, there were too many camera angles that can't happen in reality. If they had done it as more of a documentary thing where they just had somebody following Eddie Edwards and always having him over the shoulder, it would have worked better to have it not look like a skit. But anyway, but the segment that they did with Eddie Edwards going home to find that his house was empty and completely cleared out and his wife is gone, and he looks in the mirror and sees Sami Callihan looking back at him and laughing and then smashing the mirror. That was great. Although, okay, I'm going to say one thing. That mirror thing where he saw Sami Callihan reminded me a lot of the Hulk Hogan Ultimate Warrior program in WCW, and I was really, really concerned with where they were going with that for a second. But I will say that they saved that thing really, really well. Speaking of Sami Callihan, he's now got a really great program with OVE versus Phantasmo and Pentagon Jr. Things escalated this week with him almost succeeding in ripping off Pentagon Jr.'s mask. It was like 3/4 off. I think the mask came off a little bit more than they had intended before Phantasmo was able to make the save, but they did protect the identity of Pentagon Jr., which is, the big thing of respect in Lucha Libre, is that the mask is sacred. Really great job there in the main event. Now, not to say that everything was perfect on Impact. I'm definitely not a fan of Madison Rayne coming back from retirement and doing the whole return to glory and I'm going to fight for the championship and I'm going to be undefeated going through everybody, blah, blah, blah. Not a fan of it, really. I don't find her to be especially compelling. But I do like that they're trying to use Su Young's sort of mystic, creepy kind of gimmick to draw fan interest, because as Madison Rayne was cutting a somewhat forgettable and bland promo, you had the lights go out and the laughing of Su Yung and the undead bridesmaids and everything. And that was kind of interesting. The other thing I wasn't a really big fan of, having KM job to Scott Steiner. Big Grandpa Pump does not belong in the ring anymore. He can barely get out of his own way. It almost infuriates me when I keep hearing them say, oh my God, Scott Steiner's found the fountain of youth. No, he's found the fountain of Mountain Dew. The Steiner recliner that he put on KM was absolutely embarrassing. It looks like a weaker submission hold than John Cena's STF that he refuses to lock in. It looked like a submission maneuver should never look like I can get out of it in less than 3 seconds. If a submission move looks like I can get out of it as an untrained schlub on the internet with a YouTube channel, and I can just sort of slip out of a submission maneuver in under 5 seconds, yeah, it doesn't look good. Doesn't look good at all. Especially when you're trying to establish Kane as a solid mid-card heel, which he could be if they would let him. I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what they do between him and Falaba, but bringing Scott Steiner into the whole thing as sort of an open challenge, I was not a fan of it at all. And the last thing that I was not a big fan of, and this is really, really nitpicky of me, but it's something that just takes me out of every single match that I see it in is when you get these tag matches between teams that do a lot of high flying maneuvers, and there's this unnatural pause in the action where someone is standing around lining themselves up just right to take a spot. So they're standing unnaturally long in the same position, waiting for someone to do their little flippy maneuver so they can be hit with a DDT or a tornado DDT or a leg scissor takedown or something like that. It's very unnatural, and it happens a lot in these matches. The LAX versus Zini match had at least like 8 of these spots, and it drove me up the wall. It's not even about suspension of disbelief. It's just suspension of reality. It's like nobody in a fight would just stand there in an unnatural position doing sort of this unnatural Watusi wobbling, waiting for someone to come and hit them with a fancy flipping maneuver when they can just keep the pace of the match really, really crisp, hit a regular maneuver instead. And then, once somebody's down and struggling to get up off the mat, that's when you set up for your flippy stuff. But having just someone just stand there in the middle of the ring like a dumbass makes them look like a dumbass. And yeah, it took me out of the match a lot. It actually did affect my enjoyment of the match overall. Thankfully, it was more in the middle of the match and not toward the end of the match. I hate when it happens on the close. Closing a match on something like that really drives me crazy. But, it's something that they got to work on. The making things crisp, making things work a little bit better. And finally, to close off our week, we have Canada's own Smash Wrestling and the continuation of round 1 of the Northern Tournament. There were some really, really good matches this week. John Greed versus Brent Banks was one of them. In fact, it was actually the main event of this particular night, and it was something that probably would be a main event of any other Smash Wrestling card or TV taping, which is kind of cool that this is round 1 of a tournament to determine who the number 1 contender would be for the Smash Championship. It was kind of an interesting dynamic. You have the high flyer, very athletic, kind of acrobatic Brent Banks versus the sort of bigger, tougher, brawler, blue-collar, kind of beat the shit out of you John Greed. It was a nice match. I loved some of the spots that were in this match. There was it ended off of a springboard moonsault into a cutter. It's the best way that I can describe it. There were so many really cool spots that happened in this match. There was, an Alabama slam into the corner, into the corner of the ring that was followed up immediately by a Michinoku driver for a near fall, which looked absolutely fantastic. It was just really, really cool to watch. There was also another really good high flyer match, Jason Cade versus Sebastian Suave. Sebastian Suave himself, not a very big high flyer. Jason Cade is. Again, another good mesh of styles, with Sebastian Suave catching Jason Cade off a high-flying maneuver to hit his finisher, which was, I think it's called the Seal of Approval. Please forgive me if I get this wrong. I don't have my notes from the match in front of me. But yeah, that was a very entertaining match. Very good back-and-forth action, not a lot of rest holds. It definitely is nice to see different styles of wrestling, especially when you have something, people that could be up-and-comers, people that you could see, in like Ring of Honor or maybe New Japan or possibly even WWE. Maybe you'll see some of these people on NXT in the next few years. Who knows? Hard to say. Actually, one of the performers that I saw that I think would be a perfect fit for either Impact Wrestling or NXT was a wrestler by the name of Jordynne Grace, who took part in an intergender match versus Joey Janela. I actually did have a note for that particular one. In the first round match, Jordynne was great. She's a bit of a powerhouse. She reminds me a little bit, body type wise, if you were going to give a frame of reference, probably closer to a Dana Brooke, without kind of the definition in the biceps and everything, and of course without the comically enhanced bust line that the WWE seems to favor for their performers. She's all natural from all outward appearances. But yeah, very strong. Was able to hit some pretty decent power moves on Joey Janela. She took a couple pretty hard bumps. She took a couple hard strikes. I think one of them was a super kick, and the slap of the bottom of his wrestling boot against her, like her cheek or her, like the side of her, like wherever it hit, it sounded really, really loud. Like that was a slap heard around the world from that strike, and she just kept going. She hit some pretty good offensive maneuvers, got a good mix of ground attack and technical wrestling. I think that you would, again, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because once you get to somewhere like NXT, the problem is if they call you up to the main roster, for now, while Vince is in charge, you're kind of fucked, because he doesn't see women's wrestling as important, even though it was the best thing that they had going for them earlier this year and late last year. But I think in Impact Wrestling, where they're really trying to rebuild the Knockouts division, I think that she would be a very good fit, because she's very athletic, she's good in the ring, she has a charisma about her. As a matter of fact, after the match, the entire crowd was chanting, "Please come back." I would agree. I hope that I get to see her on Smash Wrestling a little bit more. And one of the cool things was, especially cool, I should say, was that our very own Ryan Janson was live tweeting Smash Wrestling while it was on Fight Network, and happened to mention Jordynne Grace's name, as saying that she would be a pretty decent fit for NXT or Impact Wrestling. And she retweeted, and a lot of her followers liked and retweeted as well. And yeah, that was kind of cool. So Ryan Janson, On Your Marks Wrestling Zone, Ryan Janson is now indie Twitter famous due to the endorsement, as it were, of Jordynne Grace. So I hope Jordynne will find her way to hear this. Might have to hashtag this so that way she is tagged. But yeah, it was really cool that she would be a part of On Your Marks Wrestling history. She is the very first performer to like and retweet anything that we have done. As far as I know, maybe Lee has been retweeted by one of the performers in the WWE, or like a current active performer. I'll have to confirm that. We have to see. We're gonna have to do a check on whether or not this is groundbreaking historical moments happening right here, for On Your Marks Wrestling. Anyway. This is run really, really long, and the rest of these are not going to run nearly as long, because I'm going to break them up. I'm doing an entire week at once. I'm glad I got it under an hour. And we will be back on Monday, or at least I will be back on Monday, with my promised how I would have booked the women's division in the WWE, so that it is not such a complete clusterfuck like it is now. If you like this video, please thumbs up, please like, please share, please subscribe. Please comment. Let us know what you liked. What do you want to hear more of? What do you want to hear less of? What can we do better? What are we doing well now? Everything that you do in that regard actually does help out the channel quite a bit, helps us to get more subscribers, helps us to basically improve what we do. But that's it for me for now. Until next time, take it easy.